he sets off and he goes to Berlin. And in Berlin, before getting to Budapest, he meets with his uncle. And his uncle tells him, you shouldn't be involved in this business. This is serious business for professionals. And Raoul says, I am a young professional. I'm 32, I'm going. What was not clear to the world at the time was that, unfortunately, the Wallenberg Empire was selling steel to the German government at the time that Raoul, in a humane spirit, was going to rescue Jews in Budapest. So this is a very complex story, and one has to deal with the full reality of it. You have a young idealist doing the right thing. You have a family acting in very expedient fashion to make money from the war and trying to dissuade the 32-year-old Raoul Wallenberg to go back home. Well, he got on the train, went to Budapest, got off the train, saw some of the cattle cars leaving the Hagi Sholem station. In my book on Raoul Wallenberg, I have pictures of him at the station. I have met with his official photographer, Tom Viras, 19-year-old Hungarian brave man who followed Wallenberg around through all of his work in Budapest. And Wallenberg said to Tom Viras, you need to be taking pictures of everything I do so that the disbelievers will know when the truth comes out what was done at this place. So in my book, which is presently only on the Kindle and all the ebooks, but soon will be out in paperback and hardcover within a couple of weeks, you'll see a lot of photographs. I think a picture tells 1,000 words. So all of Tom Viras' brave photographs are there. Tom Viras would follow Wallenberg. He'd put his camera under his sweater, but he'd take the pictures. Sometimes the camera got confiscated, sometimes the film got confiscated, but Viras persevered. And how did I meet Tom Viras? Another coincidence of coincidences. I was in New York City at Seder, Passover. I was living in New York at the time. And I met a gentleman named Bert Lazarus, who was the president of J. Walter Thompson, famous advertising agency on Madison Avenue. I told him the work that I was doing over dinner, over Passover Seder dinner. He said, oh, Wallenberg, you have to come to my office tomorrow. And there was a grin. He said, just come, we'll have lunch. So I come and I enter the office and there's a man sitting at his desk working, and there's pictures of Carol Channing and Louis Armstrong and Cary Grant. I said, oh, you're the official photographer of the stars. He said, no, I'm the official photographer of Raoul Wallenberg. So that's how I met Mr. Viras. Well, back to the story of Wallenberg in Budapest. He immediately set upon his work. He invented Swedish passports, which he made up in the basement of the Swedish embassy, and he had 10-year-old boys distribute them at night through the city. And I met one of those young men out at Pacific Palisades in California a year ago, just by chance, all this by chance. And I asked my students, do things happen by chance or by destiny? I mean, am I getting selected in the whole other aspect? I'm at a Oneg Shabbat. Jews love to eat and grilling and pray, but you got to have some food after Saturday morning. And I was there and I was having a cup of coffee and a Danish, and I hear somebody go by and say the name Wallenberg. I said, did you mention Raoul Wallenberg? He said, yes. I said, what do you know about him? He said, well, I was a young boy in Budapest. And at age 10, he would call upon me because nobody suspected that a 10-year-old would be a problem. And I'd take the Schutzpasse, the Swedish passports, around to the different families. And then he moved to Pacific Palisades and became a very successful person. Same thing with Abraham Teicholz, who was Wallenberg's counterpart in Budapest. Teicholz came from Poland, across the Carpathian Mountains, through Romania in the dead of winter to work with Wallenberg. I met with him. He told me all the Wallenberg stories that he knew, some of which are in the book. And so it's been a 27-year project of mine. Now, when I got that phone call the first morning, I felt what a privilege to be tapped, to be the lawyer asked to try to rescue Raoul Wallenberg. And I thought about it in terms of not only my family background, but that here was a man who cared enough about the Jewish people to risk his life, perhaps even gave his life, for saving the Jewish people. So it is a story of good and evil. It is a story of activity and inactivity. I wrote to President Ronald Reagan on, almost tonight, 1983, November 8th, 1983. I said, Mr. President, I am the lawyer for Raoul Wallenberg, appointed by his family. You have a duty under the U.S. Hostages Act of 1868, which says that the U.S. President must demand the freedom of any U.S. citizen held as a hostage. You remember back in the Jimmy Carter administration when people at the embassy were being held for almost a year, better than a year. Well, Carter invoked the U.S. Hostages Act as the basis for their release, even though they didn't get released until Reagan had been elected president. So I said, Mr. President, you're familiar with the procedure. So I did my letter. And I had the letter hand-delivered to the president by a personal friend of mine, Faith Whittlesey, who lives in Florida now. And she was the first female U.S. ambassador to Switzerland. He read the letter. And together they said, Mr. Wolff is right, I have the duty. Why? Because Wallenberg had been made a U.S. citizen on August 5th, 1981, in the Rose Garden. And Reagan at that time said, 3 years before my letter, I hope that making him a citizen will hasten the day when Wallenberg will sit under the trees planted on his behalf at Yad Vashem. I said, Mr. President, you're already on record. Let's do this. And that was before I filed my lawsuit. Well, that letter went into the White House bureaucracy. And when you read my book, you will find out exactly what happened. Our government had a great chance to step forward right then and there. Wallenberg was alive. The president could have commanded his release. The president was already courageous enough to take on the Soviets. But in this case, as I say, quoting Dante, the hottest room of hell is reserved for those who in a time of moral crisis suspended judgment. And a couple of his underlings, some of whom are very famous today in America, in public office, withheld approval. They deep-sixed my letter. They sabotaged the opportunity. I never learned about the fact that my letter had been deep-sixed until the year 2005, when a certain person was up for nomination, and I wanted to, the Jewish Forward had discovered the letter in the Reagan Library. But that you're going to have enough curiosity about. My mother used to tell me once in a while you have to withhold gratification. So I'm not going to go further than that. But what I'd like to do is just take another 4 or 5 minutes to wrap up my comments and then really open it up to all of you to ask questions. Because I find out that I meet new people who knew Wallenberg, which is exciting to me, or whose father or mother was saved by Wallenberg. Okay. Wallenberg now is in Budapest doing his work along with the Swedish embassy in helping to rescue the Jews, creating documents. Because